All right, good evening, fellow protectors. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. Greg LaBeouf here with you. Coach Dustin, Coach Brad are back with me as usual. So tonight, it's a bit of a generalized topic, but there's a few points and a few directions that we can go to unpack this. And I think ultimately at the end of the podcast, there's going to be a tremendous amount of value. How we get there is actually a little bit up in the air. So this is going to be a bit of an organic, not that we really pre-plan any of our episodes, but I'm interested to see where this one takes us. So, so having said that, let's punch in. So I titled this one Blah, Blah, Bullshit. Okay. And both Dustin and Brad are, I believe, the originators of often accusing me of being the guy that blah, blah, blah likes to drone on a little bit and talk. So I think this will be interesting to get their perspectives off this because how important are words when it comes to training for violence, for self-defense, for martial arts, really in anything? How important are words? How important is talking? Obviously, most people, we understand that when it comes to actually being able to defend yourself, whether that's, a mixed martial artist going into the ring or whoever it is, or just defending yourself in a violent assault, action speaks louder than words. We've all heard this, talk is cheap, actions speak louder than words. The thing that kind of hit me this morning, was something just kind of popped up randomly in my feed. And it was just somebody talking about self-defense, a quote unquote expert talking about self-defense. And I say that quote unquote because I'm not familiar with this person, so I don't know their background. I don't know how qualified they are or aren't, which is not relevant in this conversation. What is relevant though, is I just, for about 60 seconds, listened to what they were saying. And in that 60 seconds, there was hundreds of words spoken, but it, in my opinion, didn't move the needle at all. And so it was just very much this blah, blah, blah bullshit type mindset. But what I think is interesting to have a discussion on is, again, how important are words when it comes to training? What role do they play, both good and bad? And because I think, again, for a lot of people, they're struggling to separate all the noise because there is so many different, not just different points of view, but there's so many different people professing they're all professing to own the kind of one secret or one solution or the best way. And so I think that by spending some time tonight talking about the power of words and maybe the role they play and how to cut through some of that noise for people, that will help people find what they're truly looking for. Because remember, people can be looking for a lot of different things, and the goal is to help people align with what they're truly looking for. So we're gonna break this all down and kind of see where this takes us. So we're gonna just cut to the intro. We're going back in a few seconds, and we're gonna dive deep on the blah blah bullshit. I live, work, and where I am raising my two daughters. Well, I'm tired of screaming at the TV. Today, that threat is to create and train a group of men that believe in the right to life and value the freedom a man has to protect his life, his family, and his property. I'm Greg LaBeouf. Welcome to the Education of a Weaponized Man podcast. All right. Okay, so I did a little bit of a quick setup before we cut to the intro. The blah, blah bullshit is what we're talking about tonight. And I think it's important for us to have this discussion because we're talking about how important words are. And I'm just going to start here for two reasons. One is this entire podcast is talking. And even though you can either be listening to this wherever you like to download your favorite podcast, or you could be watching this on our YouTube channel or on Facebook. So there is an element, especially if you're doing video where people can see and watch, where we would be doing more actual technical breakdowns. Right, so we could be doing breakdowns of CCTV footage, meaning closed circuit cameras of violent assaults. We could be demonstrating training techniques and strategies and tactics. So you could be demonstrating the physical stuff, which is what I see all the time on Instagram. You have everybody come on. The guy grabs you. What do you do for this? Guy gets you in headlock. What do you do for this? Here's 100 different ways to do arm bars and buggy chokes and triangle locks and all these different things. And nothing wrong with that. But what happens is there's a reason why the podcast is formulated this way. I prefer to try to talk from a conceptual standpoint, because the podcast itself is titled The Education of a Weaponized Man. So to me, it's this concept: if you teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. If you catch a fish for him, you have to feed him every day. I'm trying to change people's perceptions. Like, this is what we're trying to do. So I prefer to tend to use words and talk overarching strategies, overarching tactics, and a lot of times we get into specific strategies, specific tactics, even discussing at times specific tools, but we're not physically demonstrating them. We are not speaking to people solely that do the exact type of training that we do. There's a challenge in that because people don't understand the terminology. They've never seen or been exposed to some of the techniques. So what I'm getting at, though, is I believe that words are extremely, extremely important. And I believe that for the most part, they are one of the, if not the most powerful tool in changing somebody's perception. And when I say that, I want to be real clear. Not trying to use words to gaslight somebody, which is a very big buzzy word right now. You're not trying to inundate someone with your words to get them to see it from your perspective. I don't ever want to use words to try to convince people, right? So, oh, no, you got to see it like this, see it like this. You want to use words to liberate people, to challenge people, to get them to question their own perceptions, their own understandings, their own experiences, and then from that, derive their own solutions. So this is just one aspect of it, but I believe that words are very, very powerful and are very integral to a developmental process. And I think even if you're working with professional fighters and athletes, words are important because, again, you are now trying to achieve a very specific mission. One of our favorite sayings is the context determines the content. So if you understand the content, unwittingly influence them one way or the other, but to expose them, to challenge their thinking and allow them then to come to their own conclusions. Because I believe when you use words in that way and you lead people to an aha moment, it may not, that their aha moment may not align with your perceptual like reality. We each have our own reality. But I think that's good because that liberates them. And then they're free to make the decisions that are best suited for them. So, that's a bit of a deep topic overall, but that is, and I think that's a little behind the scenes as to why I don't, and it's not like I haven't done bad guy breakdowns and, we've analyzed technical things and stuff, but this is why I'm such a big component of what we're doing each week of just having conversations and letting people listen in to these conversations, trying to share ideas and strategies and thoughts and perceptions with them, but not to try to influence them to our way of thinking, to just try to, to challenge them. Educate yourself, right? Expose yourself to different things and then do your research and kind of have your own aha moments. So for you guys, just real quick, viscerally, where does or how important or what role do you think words and talking and the quote unquote the blah blah blahing, what role does that play for you guys, and has it played in your development? How do you guys see it as coaches and instructors and stuff in your own teaching?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. Just one thing to start on that I think we do a good job of in the podcast is, unpacking the words we're using. Do you know what I mean? Like we might come out with certain terminology in a particular podcast, and then we kind of spend the whole hour like unpacking those few words or those few ideas or whatever it is, but we really spend our time unpacking stuff. And I think you guys would agree, but when I see videos on social media and stuff, I think that's what most of them, if not all of them, are typically lacking, and why they tend to go straight into more tool-based demonstrations is because they might say the right words, like they might use some of the same terminology we use because we don't necessarily create our terminology. We pull from military in different places. And so you might hear the right buzzwords, but then it's like, but then there's no unpacking. And I often that's what I'm always watching for. And I think it's because we spend, an hour every week doing it. And then of course in our training, it's there as well. And so I'm always right away, I'm looking for that. And I just feel like it's often missing. You'll hear a word and be like, oh, what's this guy talking about? And then right away, it's just like, just says it and kind of moves on. And it's like, it's almost like it's to try to impress, to try to capture the audience and be like, pay attention. I'm saying this and this and this. And it's like the flashing neon sign. But then there's no actual diving into what that really means. It's just right away into techniques and tools and stuff. So I think that's often missing. And I think that's one thing we invest our time in, and hopefully people get that and appreciate it and then get stuff from it. So
Yeah, absolutely. Brad.
Yeah, you know what? I think I'm gonna go out on and make a statement that words are probably one of the most important things in 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 weaponizing, and in terms of learning and understanding. If I'm like, as we've been kind of starting the podcast, I'm reflecting back, like even like you're right when you kind of let in is like, oh, this we don't know how we're gonna get to where we're going, but because it can go so many different ways. Like my brain went to like years of sitting in the hot tub after a full day of training, having a few beers and just doing nothing but discussion and talking and all those things, and 100% better forward. So my mind went that way.
Yeah.
My mind went to terminology, like just the word terminology. We know how powerful it is. We know like it matters,
Yeah.
especially when you're talking about the context. And for me, I'm I was like, well, this versus that means two completely different things. I could say assault and I could say fight, and it's a world of difference between those two words, and what people attached to those words is something completely different for individuals. And so like just like that was an area where I'm like, okay, well, terminology is massive. And then almost to touch on like a little bit of like kind of what you guys are talking about, in conveying that message is like, if you like how, like if we look back at even some of the stuff that we're working through right now in terms of like our own training, for structure, those types of things, like we're constantly refining terminology within our own ecosystem and blueprint and playbook, because changing one word, kill chain, is way like when we changed that and added that in, was it just took all these other words and wrapped it up into a real nice package where you're like, I get that at a more, at such a deeper level. It means so much more to me than you gotta enter,
Yeah.
you gotta execute the kill chain. So like it's just like, again, like it's one of the most powerful things in the weaponizing process in anything, because words have so much power and they could just convey a message, convey understanding, shift perspective. Yeah, so my head went to like a ton of different places. Those were the ones that I think that were standouts for me, right?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think
I'll
I
I'll
think
build off.
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to build off Brad's idea of something he said because it again pertains more to the actual my training and experiences. And like I think one thing that has been words played a big role both in learning but also learning to teach. And this is something you do a lot and teach, Greg, is words kind of become part of like these frameworks. And you explained it, I think, I forget who was there, but a while back, learning to teach and stuff. And you talked about like, oh, you say a word, and then that word like opens the drop down menu of
Yeah.
like just all these different concepts, ideas. And that's kind of what Brad just alluded to. Like one term, piece of terminology like opens up this whole area of different things you've trained and studied and spent time thinking about, but it all gets tied up into one word. And then you kind of, as you're speaking, then another word comes out, like a whole nother drop down menu comes open, and it's like, oh yeah, like this, and this, and this, but it always ties back into like a framework. Or I don't know if I'm doing a very good job explaining it. You can
Yeah.
expand on it, Greg, but I know for me that's one part of learning and also teaching where words have been super, super important.
Yeah. For me, just to build up what you're both saying, like what Brad talked about in terms of like, you're talking about having developed a vocabulary, so the words that you use that are connected, like Dustin, you mentioned, like to frameworks, and that words have meaning, and that the words that you say, that you speak to people when you are teaching people stuff, those words are always and should always be creating symbolism, like they're images, they're being instantaneously linked to something. And this is why I think this conversation is very important. Because when you, let's say, for somebody that's brand new, when you first meet somebody that you're considering to maybe become your potential instructor, and I don't even want, this isn't a personal thing about people or about style or anything like that. If you were just thinking about joining a certain organization, training organization, even if you assume that, okay, they are teaching, their goal in their teaching is directly aligned with the goal you'd like to achieve. So whether that is to become a competitive athlete at an amateur professional level, whether that is just the study and pursuit of fitness and health and martial discipline and all that type of stuff, or whether it's surviving violence, let's just assume your goal, the goals are aligned everywhere you went. But when you walk into an organization, that organization is going to have a culture, and that culture has a language. Just like if you go on, if you spent a day working with iron workers, there's a shorthand language that they use in that culture. If you then went into the hospital, an emergency room, there is a language, a shorthand that is part of the culture. So in any organization, there is a language, and that is integrated into the culture, and that's what you guys are talking about. These words have meaning, and these meaning of these words have symbolisms, and you become indoctrinated, and that's not always a bad thing to become indoctrinated. But what we're kind of getting at, and what you guys are both articulating, is that the words that are part of that culture, you can actually learn to develop an educated eye. You can have a discerning eye, and you can look at whether these words are leading you, these terminology are making you autonomous. This is kind of one of my main points that I wanted to talk about with this. When it comes to training for violence, when it comes to warriorship, you need a community, you need a tribe of people to get better. Human beings are the most social creatures on the planet. So you need a tribe. You absolutely need a tribe of people. We need to feel like we belong. However, there is this cool thing that I think exists within really, really well-defined and well-developed warrior cultures. There is this family connectedness, there's this bonding, there is this culture that is supported by words and terminologies and meanings that we can all just kind of align and get behind. It's like, again, it's like, your country's flag, like it unifies us. But in the warrior culture, the language, the training, the terminologies, the symbolism, although you have this unity, this unifying quality, it is always building autonomous human beings. If you think about it, if you can have a thousand people that are all training for war, and even though they might, you might go into battle together, 1,000 strong, you are individuals fighting that fight. You're going to have your own battles within that war. If you come out of the military context and you come to the civilian kind of world, or even law enforcement, I always say this, that you might be, part of the Blue Brotherhood, right? You're a police officer, thousands of members strong. But at a certain moment, probably one of the darkest moments in your life, you are potentially just a man or a woman fighting for your life at that point. When sugar turns to shit, you're a human being who's now involved in a conflict where someone is going to live and someone's going to die. You need to be autonomous to stand in that, even as part of a bigger unit. The civilian side of it, what are the odds that if someone breaks into one of our houses tonight, the other two are going to just happen to drop by to return, something they borrowed, at 3:00 in the morning? Like, you get what I mean? Like, we are going to be alone. And so the whole thing about the talk, and for me, what's important, I think, for people to understand, is that what I see, and again, this is my opinion, but the words and the language and the talk that I hear all the time when it comes to self-defense is so linear and biased based. And it's not terminology and language that is meant to get people to critically think and kind of become free thinking, right? Where again, how do you build people that are autonomous? They have to get the strategies, tactics, and tools. It has to light up in their neural processing center. You can't just teach them. Repetition doesn't work. You know, how many times have we met guys that you can teach them something physically, they can do it, but they can't actually use it. They don't own it. And this is one of the biggest things I was taught. I remember in the beginning being taught stuff and shown concepts and having these lectures on different subject matters, and me being able to, for the most part, intellectually process it, regurgitate it, meaning I memorized it, I'm saying it back, I intellectually understand it, but being told many times, you understand it, but you don't own it. And having to figure out what that meant, from how you go from understanding to true ownership, and always being told that's your homework. That is where the talking is, what the lectures, what Brad alluded to about the after a day of training, sitting around having a couple beers. The majority of my growth came from those off-hour, sessions that weren't really training sessions, because that is when you got the blah, blah, blah. And it didn't lead to bullshit. It's where they started to develop. You started to learn how to critically think and actually unpack and process stuff. That's the homework, until you had your awakening, until you had your aha moment. And it's not one aha moment, it's thousands of aha moments staggered throughout our training careers. You guys can talk about yours, I can talk about mine. They still happen, they have happened. And that's what makes the shift. But a lot of people, I think, with the kind of where it goes, the blah, blah bullshit, is so much energy of the talking and the training that I see going on is all convince based. I'm going to convince you. I'm going to sell you. Listen to me. I know. You know what I mean? Just do this. Don't worry about that. That wouldn't work. Don't explore this. Ignore this. Oh yeah, if he can do it, you can do it. And if those two can do it, you can do it. Everybody can do this so long as you work hard. It's these silly biased things, because martial arts, all of it, everything that has anything to do with this, from whatever, everybody flies under a banner, a flag. You know what I mean? This is our school's crest. This is the name of our style. This is the name of our system. This is, that's what happens. And so the second that happens, you know what I mean? Now what you're doing is just, you're defending the nation. You know what I mean? It's interesting. I don't know. So yeah, for me, it's tough to fully articulate to people, what this looks like when you have people that are free thinking. But I think one of the things that we can go in on is, there's a saying that I'm really, really fond of. You guys have probably heard me say it before, but it's relatively new to me. But basically, it's weak men will always protect their excuses. And you'll hear that in their words, whereas strong men protect their values. And so, again, if we just come back to this, what we're talking about, listen to what people are saying. And when people are rationalizing, justifying, making excuses, minimizing, using the elements of denial, they're protecting something. They're protecting their bias. That's not the type of language that liberates you. That's the type of language that binds you, right? It shackles you, because it's this is the way, this is us, this is how we do things, this is this. There is only one way, there is only one human, that kind of thing. Whereas strong men that protect their values, it's you just hear a different type of language out of them, because they don't need to convince anybody else to share their values. If you look at our podcast, listen to the podcast, I'm very strong in my convictions, in my beliefs as to what I believe works for me, because my experiences, what I was taught, what works for me. what we share with people in the weaponizing process is, listen, it's just like if you look in the world, there is no universal reality. There's facts, but there's no universal reality. Meaning what? Was it warm or cold today? Well, that's a personal perception. A guy that grew up in Jamaica and is now living in Edmonton is probably thinking it's pretty fucking cold today. Us guys that grew up fucking north here, today was a beautiful motherfucking day, minus that wind, right? But the sun was out. It was
unless
like,
you got in a cold plunge.
yeah,
You get in a
exactly.
cold plunge, it changes
Yeah,
things.
that shit, and that also is perception based, right? But the idea of that is like, it's like warm to me. So, but here's the thing: what's the facts? What was the temperature today? I didn't check, but +7, I think, 7 degrees Celsius. That's a fucking fact. So when we're talking about stuff as it pertains to combat violence, we always say this: the immutable concepts. These are the principles that exist. If I pick my pen up and I drop my pen, that's gravity. I can go anywhere in the world and I can drop this pen, and without some sort of physical interruption, that pen's going to drop. Why? Because gravity works in Canada, the same as the States, the same as Russia, anywhere in the world. You get what I mean? It works the same. So the immutable, the facts of what you need to understand about violence are the indisputable facts. But then what we're doing with our language and our how we share and the words that we use is we're helping people to discover their personal reality for the rest of it. And that's what leads people to liberated thinking, because that's how you make autonomous warriors. Those are individuals that will be able to be that, life-saving force in a dark, critical moment. Okay, so I mean, I'm not sure how else that we can kind of explain off this, but again, I don't know if you guys maybe share a little bit of whatever's in your head or some of your aha moments and how powerful those were and what led to those.
So many.
Is that just me or is he muted?
Yeah, sorry, I'm talking away.
Yeah, I thought my mic got unplugged again. I got up to check my mic. 'Cause that's happened before where I've accused you guys of being muted, and it turned out that it was my mic got pulled out. But it was you this time.
knew because the elephants upstairs were
The kids stomping around. There you go. Yeah.
I muted. I just forgot. One of the things that kind of sparks in my head is just being like connected versus disconnected. Like what's congruent? Like, when you talk about the terminology that one uses to talk about whatever they're doing, a martial art, weaponizing, like we're very diligent and specific with the words that we use, because again, it helps us really convey the message of like the context that we're building. And I think where some of this blah blah bullshit is, and maybe it might be something that is intuitive in nature, is that when you see somebody talking about one thing, they're describing one thing, and then they say something else. You're like, but those two things don't fully mesh up.
Yeah.
Like your messaging isn't congruent, because you're talking about someone trying to kill me, and then you want me to go into a horse stance and do a vertical like horse punch or something fucking stupid. I mean, now I'm exaggerating, embellishing a bit, but I think a lot of people out there, when they see something like, it doesn't add up, and maybe they can't pinpoint their finger on it, but it's just like, this doesn't make sense, because the picture that I'm painting, maybe even if they don't have the words to attach to it, then it's disconnected towards, oh, well, this is what we do for that. It's like, I don't get it. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of times is because if you're not that diligent and that intentful with your words, you could have a very big disconnect in how you are actually articulating. And this isn't just weaponizing or self-defense. This is everything. This is communication, right? But yeah, it's just something that made me think about it as we're progressing through the podcast.
Yeah, well, before, in case Dustin wants to jump in, but what you said just sparked this in me too, because we don't know what we don't know, right, until we learn. And so my thing off everything you're just saying, if people don't know, they don't know. This is why I think conversation is important. But I think, and again, why one of the takeaways I want people to walk away with from this podcast is you have to have conversations, but then you have to learn how to analyze the conversations you've had, to really learn to listen and hear what people are saying, because it is so clear at times when what you're hearing is bias and people protecting the excuses that just keep pointing back to the fact that they're right. I mean, I got another piece I want to add to this, but you did that sparked it, and then I'll add to it towards the end here. But that's the thing. You don't know what you know, but this is why this is so important for people to learn how to have conversations, listen to the words that people are saying, and then be able to analyze what they were saying, and recognize whether or not this is somebody protecting their biases or somebody sharing their values, right? And when they're sharing values and beliefs, they can have absolute convictions, but they're not trying to force you into their values or pull you into it or manipulate you into it. And most of that's even done subconsciously. They are sharing the values and sharing the facts of the world and their perceptions surrounding those facts, which then allows you to make an independent decision for who you are and what your needs are. That's critical, because warriors are critical thinkers. And so the language that is part of the culture has to inspire critical free thinking, not bias and loyalty. You get what I mean? Dustin, sorry if I interrupted your thoughts there.
No, actually, no, you didn't. But just off of what you just said, it got me thinking about, you know, I've been watching this finance guy for like a year, I think now, just on YouTube, and I watch a lot of his content and kind of follow what he's doing and saying. And I was actually thinking about it the other day, like maybe a week ago, and I was just like, man, like I'm like pretty dedicated to following this one guy, and I'm like, why is that? Like, what is it about this guy that just resonates with me so much? And the conclusion I came to is what you just talked about. It's the fact that he's not there saying you should do this, you should do this, you should do this because of A, B, C, D, and he's not ramming it down your throat. He has a very similar approach to what we have, whereas like this is why I do this. He's doing, which finance has nothing to do with violence,
Yeah.
but it doesn't matter because it's like the model is the same,
Yeah.
right? It's just I'll show you what I do and why I do it, how I do it, and but if you understand the why behind it, it's like that's what resonates. And so for me, I'm like that's what makes sense, and that's what's always been there for training in the way we train. Our training methods are very much that way.
Yeah.
And so when you have kind of just like, here's what I do, you said it tonight. This is why I do this. I do it like this because of this. And when you teach it, when we teach it, same thing. It's like, why I do it like this? This is why I do it like this. Maybe that works for you. Maybe that doesn't work for you.
Yeah.
You got to unpack that yourself and figure it out.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That just sparked in me because you guys know that I'm very clear on what I do and why I do it. And but there are people in my circle that have tried for many, many years to convince me to do something different, to take my knowledge and my skill sets and do it and apply it in a way that is not authentic to who I am, right? And love the guy, but it gets to be frustrating at times because this is the part of recognizing that we're different. Everyone's different. There is no universal reality. There's our reality, and then there are facts in this world, and we are going to have perceptual differences. I think the very best things in life ignite and help people find what it authentically they're looking for. You can you can find guys that start their journey training with us and learning to weaponize and only care about protecting themselves and their family from violence. And then somewhere along the journey, again, the conversations, the training methodologies, the strategies, the tactics, all this type of stuff, it ignites a different part of them, and they venture off into something different, which may be a martial art, or maybe a combative sport, or maybe just something completely different in life that is more aligned with authentically who they are. I believe that is because most people in the business would go, well, that fucking sucks because the last thing you want to do is get a guy that's paying you money every month and have him recognize that instead of using his fingers to gouge out eyes, he should be tickling the ivory and playing the fucking piano. And so he quits this and goes does piano lessons. And it's something about the way you're training people and the thinking that brought him to that. You know what I mean? And it's like that is creating an autonomous human being. Part of our training is there's always the self-preservation. That's the tip of the spear. How do we protect ourselves and our family? But what the spear is mounted to, the shaft of the spear, is the self-perfection, which means you're creating more enlightened, critically thinking, better evolved human beings. And right away, viscerally, you could have people say, there's no way you're creating a better quality of human being by teaching them violence. Well, human beings are not one-dimensional. Violence is part of our nature. I mean, I don't think anybody can argue that. Look at the state of the world right now. Human beings, I always love this saying when it comes to describing human beings as it relates to violence, right? When people think that we are more evolved than what we are as a species. Human beings do things to other human beings that animals would never consider. We are sadistic. You know what I mean? We will commit atrocities. You know what I mean? To children, it's fucking horrific what human beings are capable of. All I'm saying is that when you actually get in touch, this is a tremendous vehicle to get in touch with the violent side of your nature. When you get in touch with the violent side of the nature, that is impossible to do without developing the other sides of your nature. Your compassion, your understanding, your empathy, all of these different things. These are all qualities that get developed. But those qualities, I believe, are severely inhibited in the development of a human being when the language that is being used is biased and is used to fixate people, linear, keep them locked in, conforming people to a singular viewpoint, which again, it's impossible for people to deny that martial arts have been, probably for as long as martial arts have ever been on the planet, my system versus your system, my way versus your way. When really, it's a stupid fucking argument, because just come back to, well, the context determines content, ends half of that debate right there. I mean, there is a moment where a Thai kick or a boxer's punch or a Wing Chun man's economy of motion or a Kali man's reverberation or ability, line familiarization with the weapons, where there's a moment where that is the most efficient, beautiful thing you could ever do, and a second later, it's the dumbest, least efficient thing that you could do. And you know what I mean? So, again, I don't want to go too deep in that stuff. We're just coming back to the whole fact that I just repeatedly keep hearing this blah, blah bullshit, and it's just all to anchor people and inhibit people, not to liberate people. Okay, so there is lots of people, millions of people that could care fucking less what I say and what I do, and it just means nothing to them. And that's okay. And then there's people that this is exactly what they've been looking for. And it just aligns with who they are and what their mission is. And that's great. And this will be in their life as long as it needs to be in their life. But if it's done right, the words that you use, the language that your culture is built on, makes people autonomous. Yes, you become part of something. Yes, you have a brotherhood. Yes, you're around like-minded people. But it is always about making people autonomous. I mean, I remember from first day one, Paul telling me, my whole mission is to get you to the point where you don't need me. And he goes, yet at the same time, I hope we have a lifelong friendship. But if we fast forward 10, 15, 20, 30 years into the future, if we're hanging out together, if you're still coming to me, it is not because I am the keeper of the knowledge and handing you the crumbs to keep you coming for 30 years. It is because we have a mutual respect for each other. And so we are coming together out of respect, not some stupid fucking loyalty that is predicated off the fact that I have now indoctrinated you and you are under the banner of our flag. You know what I mean? That's the blah, blah bullshit. So it just gets to where you're a free thinker, you're liberated. And then you go out and you create other liberated free thinkers and all that kind of stuff. So that is, I don't know, again, I hope people find value in this, because I just think a lot of people that come across this podcast hopefully they're connecting and understanding our perception of what we do. Because if this is in fact does align with your authentic self, fantastic. But if they're listening to this and this helps them have an aha moment that this is the last fucking thing they ever want to do, that is also, it has served its purpose. Right. So, I don't know anything off that, guys, or I mean, we're probably not going to be able to go too much deeper on this, but any other kind of thoughts?
I think for me, like just when you said like, it's people don't stick around, like we didn't stick around because you're the keeper of the secret. And I kind of laughed because I'm like, well, I'm like, the reality of it is like when you really look at like any aha moments, and they'll speak for both Brad and I, and lots of people in the organization, but for sure the two of us. Whereas like so many of the every aha moment we've had, I think most of them has been like doing training something, and then you say something, maybe it's once, maybe it's through over the course of a weekend, whatever it is, a little prolonged exposure. You say something clicks. It's that, oh, I was like, oh, like now this makes sense. And it's the same thing you said 6 months before, 6 years before, and 16 years before. But you're only ready for something when you're ready for it. And I think that's what it is like a big part of the journey is you developing as a warrior to the point where then you're ready for certain lessons. And so it doesn't matter how many times you say it. But if you weren't persistent in being willing to say things over and over and over again, then we wouldn't be where we are, because it doesn't matter when you're ready to say it, it's when we're ready to actually hear it. And so I think that's where the blah 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 part is good, is you sometimes have to hear things more than once to truly get the full juice from the squeeze, so to speak.
Yeah.
We gotta switch it. Instead of blah blah bullshit, you gotta say blah blah aha.
Yeah.
There you go. Right.
That's what it feels like. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what you just said too. It's like most times, like, because again, I'm very, very against a lot of the dogma that is associated with a lot of different martial arts and different even combative sports things. And I get why I get the value aspect of it, but I think the damaging aspect outweighs the value aspect. And what I'm talking about is just a simple saying that Paul used to say to him all the time: belts bind people. Meaning, like, when you start chasing certifications and you start moving up in belt ranks and all this type of stuff, it binds people. Matter of fact, typically the people that get closer to the higher level belts, like black belts or whatever certificates or whatever they're doing, the higher people get, the more constrained their free thought becomes, right? Because you have to, again, if you want to become a priest or you want to become a bishop or you want to become a cardinal, you have to get all in on the dogma and the stigmatisms, and there are value systems to that, the discipline, the reward. People like to benchmark and crucible mark journeys and helps people to stay motivated. I get the value side of it, but people are always quick to point out the value of it, but I don't hear anyone ever talk about the negative of it and the hierarchy and the pecking order and all that bullshit and the politics and all the stuff that comes with all that shit. And it's like the whole goal, again, with words and the language and culture somebody has. I think for us, the difference is this. I don't give a fuck about all that stuff because I went through that stuff. I did martial arts, as you guys have. I did the combative sport. I was around that enough to get that understanding of it. And then I was in a violent assault and almost murdered. And at the end of the day, when you got a group of people bottling you into oblivion, none of that matters. It's like when you have a near-death experience, you realize something. You don't take anything with you. Not a fucking thing comes with you. When it's literally about life and death, there's no belt, there's no certificate. It doesn't mean fucking shit. There is no status in that moment. None of it matters. So again, the language, the training that you're using is always meant to lead people to water, not force them to drink. And again, I just hope people get this concept, because you have to have conversations, listen to fucking people. And sometimes you need to have multiple conversations and listen to people a lot. But then you got to step back. And it's not about saying, oh, that guy's full of shit or not. Oh, that guy's lying to me, or that guy's exaggerating, or that guy's telling the truth even. Because there is no universal truth. There are facts, but There is only your reality. So I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about sitting back and trying to fucking figure out how to find your people. What do you want? What is going to serve you? Right? Because for us, protecting our family is liberating ourselves from fear. And that fear for me is most of that actually comes down to fear of really taking responsibility. It is terrifying to be responsible for another human being's life. And when you get married and when you have kids, or if you just look at your parents or your grandparents or your cousins or nieces or nephews, I mean, for me, there's just something about like that's your fucking family. There's just something in me that is like, and I think this is wired into most men. Not only do we want to provide, we want to protect. So there's something very fucking primal about that, where it's like, you know, I love the police in the sense that like it's a thankless fucking difficult fucking job, and I'm grateful people do it. Same as the military. But they cannot, and they're not going to protect me. So there's a tremendous fear a lot of people have of taking that responsibility. But you know what I mean? So that liberation comes like belts don't matter. None of this shit matters. And when people feel that, when you have these conversations where you're saying, these are the facts. I wish I could change some things about violence that are true about violence. I wish I could change them. But you can't change them. That's the reality of how violent predatory criminals operate. They're not looking for fights. They're not looking for fair. They're looking to fucking destroy. You will be outgunned, outmanned, bigger, strong, all this type of shit. Okay? I wish you could change them as you can't. Those are the facts. But then what you have to do is be able to understand how to lead people to their own aha moments and discoveries and make them fucking autonomous. Because at the end of the day, they're going to be standing there. It's going to be them protecting their families, not you with them, not somebody else doing it. It's going to be them. So you have to, the training has to liberate. It can't be the blah, blah bullshit. It has to be the blah, blah, aha. Where people actually fucking own this shit without having to, hopefully, without having to ever go through the experience of almost being killed, murdered, or losing family members to violence. Because then you're going to figure it out, right? And I would, you know, after's too late. I mean, my awakening happened after, so it's not too late, but you get what I mean, right? Sometimes it's unrecoverable. You know, the loss of a child or a spouse when you should have known or ought to have known that you needed to do something different. And again, and if that's not your thing, then you need to figure that out too, right? There's lots of guys that have no interest in defending themselves, their family, and they have the financial resources, so they hire bodyguards. You know what I mean? What Bruce Lee said, you know what I mean? If you're not into doing the reality, you know what I mean? Live a less aggressive lifestyle and hire a bodyguard. He had some, I'm paraphrasing that obviously and probably poorly, but I always thought that was super fucking funny, right? It's like, you don't have to defend yourself. If you got the means, you know, get the best security systems and hire bodyguards and all kinds of shit, and you'll probably be okay. So anyways, for me, this will be my final thought on it, and I'll let you guys throw something downrange if you have. But the blah, blah bullshit. If it's your truth, if it's your reality, like if that resonates with you, it's never going to be bullshit. Other people can call it whatever they want. If that's your path, your direction, if that's authentically aligned with who you are, then it's going to lead you to some of the best blah, blah, aha moments of your fucking life. But learn to find your people. Learn to listen to what people are saying and how they are talking, and you develop a discerning eye and an ear, and ask yourself, is this individual, is this organization helping to liberate me, or are they looking more to indoctrinate me? Right? And if you're like, no, that's exactly the type of indoctrination I'm looking for, then it's a good indoctrination. Go for it. Dive in, you know, wholeheartedly. But find your fucking people. Okay? And if it's warriorship, I think what develops the best human beings is when you make them autonomous. Right? Again, teach a man to fish, feed him for a lifetime, catch a fish, feed him every day, right? Yeah, you know, so that's my kind of wrap on it. For you guys, any final thoughts?
Yeah, nothing specific really. It's just that this is a very large, like, subject matter. You know, because even there's things that brought up now would bring us into a completely different aspect of why terminology and words have power.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, so it's just it's again like I agree. Find what makes sense to you, what
Yeah.
resonates with you, and that's like you're obviously drawn to it, right? For a reason. So yeah, no, for sure.
That's awesome. Dustin.
Yeah. I'm good. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. This is why I love doing this, because this type of stuff is what we sit around and talk about a lot. You know what I mean? In our clients and the people that come in and come out, and you know what I mean? It's just, I love when I meet people, and this maybe sound weird because this is not first and foremost a business for me, even though this is how I make my living. I've had people that have requested information come in. We take the time, we sit down, we invest time in these individuals. I've had guys that have invested 7 hours in personal meetings, on the phone, emails, back and forth, phone conversations, all trying to help them, decide whether this is right. This is what we're talking about. These conversations. And at the end of it, we both came to the realization that this is not the right fit for them. And even helped people, point them in a different direction that is potentially way more aligned with who they are. That is a massive success for me. I've never once regretted putting that time and energy into the conversation for people to figure out, for everybody involved to figure out, if this is right. And that just comes back, that blah, blah bullshit is avoidable. And so that's, find your people, learn to develop that educated eye, right? Ear type thing. So, all right. I appreciate that. This was a very indicative of exactly why I like doing this podcast, and appreciate your guys' time and input, as always. So, and for everybody that watches and listens, thank you so much. Appreciate you deeply. And again, we hope that the Education of a Weaponized podcast is helping to educate you and find your people, and whether that this moves you left, right, towards us, or away from us. It's so long as it's helping you become a more evolved person, understand things maybe you didn't understand before. That's the mission of this. So that's it. All right, everybody, stay safe, stay weaponized, and I definitely hope to chat again soon. Everybody, take care.